Thanks, Addison. And good morning, everybody. So happy to get us started here for our June Workforce Council meeting. As I mentioned, and as people come in, we have some new members here, so want to take a minute at the top of this to join us, to dropping into the chat who you are, which organizations you represent. And I'll also make mention when you do that, do your best in the chat. Like everyone, we do have a handful of attendees. This is a public meeting, so people do tune in to listen to the conversation and follow along. So always important, I think, for folks who are listening in to sort of know who's on the council and who they represent. Before we got started, I just wanted to welcome Representative Plouffe to the council, first meeting here, and excited to have you. This is a legislatively mandated council that brings together representation from the agency. So most frequently, but not exclusively, the team under our Deputy Commissioner, Jocelyn Bown, who oversees our workforce program supports and innovation team. So you'll hear a little bit today from their team about some of the work in our credential, but we'll also have staff from across the agency providing updates and looking for feedback and insight from this network of experts from community colleges and programs and our Head Start associations represented. And as people join, you'll see in the chat the different organizations that they represent, and we really lean on as we sort of go through the development of different initiatives and projects here at the agency.
Thank you.
And if you'd like to introduce yourself to the team too, I know it's always a good opportunity to sort of orient folks to sort of you and the things you're excited about.
Sure. My name is Bridget Plouffe. I am a state representative, newly elected in January. I represent parts of Brockton, parts of Easton, parts of East Bridgewater, and all of West Bridgewater. I'm really excited to be here today and get started on this, and I look forward to working with all of you.
Fantastic. And timely too, we're going to spend a minute just updating the council here, sort of where we're at in the budget process. So before we get into the agenda and really into the meat of what we're going to be discussing today, a couple quick updates that I think are just important for folks who are on our advisory council. This will be somewhat repetitive, so I apologize for that. The commissioner is not able to join us. She's usually here. She's actually with the governor at the ALX Business Summit over at GBH today. The summit this year is focused on building generational wealth, and Governor Healy and the commissioner are going to be on a panel actually talking about specifically the importance of childcare as an economic driver, as an impact on sort of the broad the state's workforce generally, and a lot of the work that we've been focused on in this conversation around professional development, capacity growing across the state, and a lot of the collaborative work we've been thinking about through the task force. So really excited about it. I'm excited to see the coverage that comes out of that conversation today. But she was sad that she couldn't be here, and I think is really interested in one of the topics in particular, which is around the credential development we mentioned. And I will be talking about in just a little bit. A couple just sort of programmatic updates. I want to make mention here, and especially with this group and folks listening, our Early Childhood Educator Scholarship is now open. We're very excited that that's open, so please do join the website and EEC team if someone might be able to drop the link into the chat for everyone for sharing, doing our best to get that out there. I think a really important opportunity. And you know, over the last couple of years, this group has talked about some of the changes we've made over there to really expand the reach. So share it wide, share it far, make sure folks can take advantage of that opportunity. Thank you, Jackie. And I also want to sort of shout out the team here too, under Jocelyn's leadership. I don't know if we have folks from our CPPI team, but over the last couple of weeks and in the weeks ahead, we've been embarking on a bit of a roadshow to celebrate our CPPI partnerships, our Commonwealth Preschool Partnership Initiatives. We have about 30 different communities around the state. And the commissioner and Jocelyn and our CPPI leadership team have been dropping in at different regional meetings with community partners and school districts to really highlight the innovative things that are happening in classrooms as a result of, I think, the time and the attention and the planning through CPPI that these partnerships are really resultant in. And Jocelyn, I don't want to put you on the spot, but just want to give a minute if there's any particular highlights or takeaways. We're sort of mid-cycle on these things, so it's a good opportunity to reflect.
I think it's just been wonderful to hear from the communities doing this work, how everybody is working together, and the ways in which CPPI investments have really had a direct and positive impact on children in terms of their access to special education services without lots of busing, as an example, the curriculum and the professional learning that have been supported through the funding, and the types of access that have been built. Every community is in a different place, and this is unique in terms of its areas of focus and its goals. But I think that the importance of working together and leveraging all the resources that are available in service of the community goals around these areas, and the power that comes from having the opportunity to do that work and really think about everything that is available and how to make it all work together, really comes through consistently across the different meetings that we've been having. So looking forward to continuing the roadshow and hearing the stories from the CPPI communities directly.
Awesome. And I think the plan is we're out on the Cape next week. I know we're going to be in Framingham soon. I think we're looking for some North Shore sites and visits as well too. So looking forward, I think, to learn a little bit more and then really recap sort of the learnings there and continue the work. And one of our topics, like I said, is around the budget. So really excited for it and hopeful for some of the investments we see there. Last note I'll say for this group, next week is our June board meeting. This is the last board meeting in our sort of fiscal year 25 board cycle. We're actually going to be out at Walker, one of our residential programs in Needham. We'll live stream same time, same place if you follow along on YouTube. But really excited for the topics. We're going to spend a little bit of time on C3. We're going to be talking a little bit about the agency's work to update our residential regulations, which haven't been updated in quite some time, but we have a really dedicated and I think passionate team who's really thinking about how we take those regulations, much like we did at the CCFA regulations, sort of to match the current time, current space of the environment and reflective of where we are and where we want to go. So talking a little bit about the thinking there and also opportunities for engagement over the summer. So do please tune in. Again, we'll be at Walker, but always available if you follow us on YouTube or drop into our website. Our board site has a link to where you can tune in. Sarah Cian, I promise you, it was the first thing I mentioned that scholarship was open. Don't think I didn't forget it. So with that, and if I didn't miss anything, EEC team that feels sort of pressing and important, happy to dive into today's agenda. First items around the FY26 budget development. So happy to dive in if folks are ready for that.
Yeah, Chris, I think we are all set to go.
Great. You want to pull those slides up and we'll hit the ground running? Perfect. Great. So yeah, if you could go to the next one. So just as a status update for folks who are very familiar with this, we're in the sort of tail end of our budget development process. Right now, we're headed into what's known as a conference committee. So this process kicked off with the governor filing her proposal, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Back in January and in between April and May, the House and then the Senate developed their own budget proposals. We're very grateful to say that, for the most part, there's a lot of alignment around areas of investment, the importance, and I think it really reflects the work that we've been doing together, both in the agency and in support of the work that's happening on the ground in communities. So really excited to sort of see where we land. And appreciate the partnership and the development that we've gone through in this process with our colleagues in the legislature to be attentive to the areas that are sort of most important and driving real impact in communities. So the conference committee process is one where there's differences between the House and the Senate. A group of representatives and senators will come together and try to develop a compromise bill that will be presented to the governor as the state's final budget. She'll have the opportunity to review that, offer vetoes or changes, and ultimately sign a budget into law to kick off the next FY26, which begins in July. So we're near the end of the process, but we wanted to take a minute to just take stock of where we are. Before we do that, I do want to acknowledge, and Representative, I'll say, and Michelle Licio, I saw you join too. I just want to say thank you for taking action on a supplemental budget recently that was filed. As we go through this process, you'll see we're talking about two different documents. We have a FY26 budget and an FY25 fair share supplemental budget that are being processed together. In addition to that, there had been a supplemental budget that was really focused on an investment in our childcare financial assistance programs. So we talked a little bit about that this morning at the Advisory Council. But again, couldn't be more appreciative of, I think, the collaboration and moving that bill along and getting it to the governor's desk. Our team is hard at work at getting those dollars out into the streets and on to the programs. So one of the three bills, money bills that we've been watching, has a green checkbox next to it, which is fantastic. For the rest of this conversation, we'll be talking about the two FY26 budget and this FY25 fair share supplemental budget that is a companion piece. Next slide. Thank you. So just to orient us again on process, I want to take a beat and go back to January. This is just a quick summary slide of what the administration's really keyed in as the Gateway to Pre-K agenda, and it's inclusive of really three primary investments in our CPPI programming, which we talked about briefly, maintenance funding for our childcare financial assistance programs, which support low-income families with low income or no income in accessing childcare so that they can participate in work, pursue job opportunities or advancement, or go to training in educational opportunities, and also sustained funding for Commonwealth Cares for Children, our C3 program, which provides monthly support to programs. So these are the sort of three cornerstones to the governor's budget. If you go to the next slide, Addison. Paired with additional investments across multiple line items dealing with the administration of the agency, our partners in the CCR&R world, our resource and referral agencies, Head Start, and some investments around program supports and quality, as well as professional development through career pathways. So I always encourage folks to take stock of sort of all the things that we do. A great place to kind of see that is in our budget documents. The governor's proposals are linked here, but I just wanted to sort of orient against that timeline what that proposal looked like. You'll see the top three items there, the sort of top three build items. Just to take note, because the next slide we sort of step into areas of alignment and focus with our partners in the legislature. So Addison, if you don't mind moving into the next slide. As I mentioned, both the House and the Senate have produced their own budget proposals. What you see here is sort of the highlights, and what I'll call to attention is there's a good level of alignment, I think, between especially those top three areas. There's investments in CCFA to sustain the program. Some differences we'll have to sort out there. There's alignment on C3 and the funding level that reflects for the next fiscal year, which we're appreciative for. And then you can sort of work through here investment in both places around CPPI. Again, a little bit of a difference in funding amount, but excited to see where we land in conference to make the most of the investments, and some changes in outside section. So the task of our colleagues in the legislature is going to be taking these two proposals and creating a compromise conference budget that incorporates investments and policy initiatives or proposals from both branches to present to the governor. So I'll take a beat here just as we think about what the governor proposed and sort of what we're looking at. from legislative proposals on the FY26 budget and see if anyone has just process questions or specific questions about anything that's been proposed by our colleagues over in the legislature. Hearing none, seeing no hands, happy to keep moving. Okay. I think someone in the chat, let me take a beat here. Oh, okay, catching up. And this is just a recap, sort of overview of the dollars behind the budget. These slides will be available to everybody when this meeting wraps, and we'll make sure you have a copy of this. You can go to the next slide, which highlights initially the fair share supplemental budget, which we can spend a minute on here. But again, I would encourage folks to take a look in here. You'll see sort of those areas of alignment and those things that will get sorted in through the conference process. So the last item here, this is the FY25 fair share supplemental budget. So when the governor filed her budget in January, she also filed what's called a supplemental budget. And this is a process through which we allocate surplus dollars. And in this case, we had a number of surplus dollars specifically from fair share revenue, which goes to transportation and education projects. And we're fortunate enough to be included in that supplemental budget with a total request in the early ed space of $150 million. So that included some investment in CPPI over the course of 3 years and some dollars to make investments in some of the recommendations that are coming out of our early education and care interagency task force, some of the capacity building and workforce development work that we know is so critical. Some flexible dollars there was the governor's initial proposal. What you'll see in the box to the right is, again, the House and the Senate both took their opportunity to review and propose investments here. So the House proposal and the Senate proposal are sort of both here. What I'll say is most of what was included in the governor's proposal is reflected more over on the full FY26 budget, which is partially why it looks sort of like a smaller list. They moved a lot of the investments that were sort of proposed here into that space, but some clear investments from our partners in the House around CCFA, loan repayment, and accessing childcare financial assistance for our educators. So both of these bills are currently in a position where both branches have acted. They'll head into a conference committee, and in the sort of weeks ahead, we'll hopefully see a conference report that will kick us off into what will be FY26. And over the next few weeks, we're going to be working closely where we have opportunities with our colleagues in the legislature to advocate where it's appropriate for the investments that the administration proposed and that are really critical, I think, to maintaining and moving the needle on the programs and initiatives that we've all set out together, and many of which were proposed in last year's budget that we've been really focused on implementing. The next topic is actually related to that around developing an educator credential. So that's where we're currently at in process. Again, I think just really appreciative of the attention and the investment, the sustained investment that we're seeing in early education and care. It's taken a long time for the field to get to this place, and there's always room to grow, always room for improvement, but sometimes it's a good moment to sort of take stock of the opportunity that's behind these numbers and how every one of these dollars really does mean investments in communities and investments in programs that are making a difference in children's lives and families' lives. And I'll look at Sarah Cian and say, when those dollars come through on scholarship, it makes a difference in educators' lives too. And that's really built into these line items in the budget that we're all sort of talking about, is a really broad reach and touch in the field. So Sarah Cian, something to add? Oh. So I'll take a beat there before we move. I don't know if there's another slide, Addison, in the budget space. No, I didn't think so. So why don't you pull that down really quickly? If anyone has any questions, if there's any thoughts or feedback in the budget space, I want to give a moment for that before we jump into the credential work. Okay, fantastic. Well, I will hand it over to Jocelyn, to you for the next piece of this, and I'll just say, I think this is something that Jocelyn and her team, and with input from a lot of you, has been focused on for a really long time, and it's just a really exciting moment as we're sort of moving towards this structure and sort of building this infrastructure that we get to sort of lean into and lean on. And I think the impact down the road is just going to be really remarkable. So really excited for the conversation. It's very similar to a presentation that we offered at our board meeting last month, but excited to go a little bit deeper with folks today.
Okay, thank
Jocelyn?
you, Chris. And so as Chris said, we've been speaking to many people about where we are with the credential system, and I think are at a point where we're starting to transition from the design work we've done to thinking about what the first few steps are to move towards implementation. Just to frame up the overall vision, sort of guiding vision of how we're thinking about and working on this, we have both the long-term goals and then also the shorter-term goals that we set to manage our day-to-day activity. So our longer-term goal, and I think we've been talking about this for a very long time, is to develop a system that supports professional advancement across the field, is inclusive and accessible to all educators and program types, and is competency-based, which includes a focus on practice application. And this is something, as we've been really digging into it, that just keeps coming up again and again and again. If you have a competency-based system, education and being an educator and teaching young children is a skill that one can practice, and an important component of everything that we're developing is that it includes that practice application, not just the theory. We want to make sure we're developing a system with clear and accessible entry points for everybody coming into the field. We know we need to start bringing people in and then keeping them in the field as well. And one way to keep people is to provide a system that really has a clear career ladder with accessible opportunities to move up that ladder. And that is something that we are working on and is a goal of this system. And we also hold a commitment to engage with the field broadly to make sure that what we develop is aligned with the needs of all program types and roles, and that we create something that is of value to those working with educators in the field, hiring educators, that our credential means something not just because we require it, but because the skills that come with that credential are of value to those working in programs. This is an ambitious vision. To do that, we are looking at how do we break these steps down into a staged launch. We'll get into some of the details about sort of how we're structuring this credential, but one thing that has been a challenge in the current system that we have is that certification relies on college coursework, and it's not degree-based, it's individual college courses. And this is challenging for some people who, for a variety of reasons, do not find college coursework accessible. I will also say it isn't advantageous to anybody, because what ends up happening is many people take many different college courses and never articulate those together into a degree. They take them in different institutions depending on what's available. They are in sort of matriculating into the institution, engaging with the institution and planning a pathway of courses that will get them to a degree. They're responding to our certification requirements in a very pragmatic way. So we do want to develop a system that has multiple pathways, and it does not force educators into that particular approach to trying to advance. We also focus a great deal on mentorship and leadership skills. We will talk about this in a few slides, but recognizing that educators have many things that they want to do in their time as a professional. For some, they want to stay in the classroom and continue to develop and grow their skills, but have leadership opportunities in that setting. And others want to move on to different roles, but not always a director. So we've been thinking a lot about sort of what the different roles are that we could focus on. Apprenticeships are a very important part of this. We're working closely with the Department of Apprenticeship Standards and a number of partners who are piloting apprenticeship programs that we are sort of working on, both figuring out the nuts and bolts of getting apprenticeships up off the ground, but also working on moving towards alignment with the new credential, which fits really well with the competency-based focus we have that is very well aligned with the expectations and standards that drive apprenticeships. And we do plan to have a clear and manageable transition process from certification right now to the credentialing system, whereby it is clear where you fit if you are currently certified and when things start to count and have currency. And again, really committed to communicating as often as possible and with as many people as possible to support educators in understanding and navigating this future system. You can go to the next slide. And I mentioned this, but also want to reiterate, one really core principle in all of this work is recognizing the importance of educational leadership. It is the leadership at a program site that is really the driver of supporting the development of that site as a place for professional learning. And when that happens, educators come with their skill set in the program, but they learn and grow and develop and support each other in learning and growing and developing on the site. So much of what we're also thinking about is not only how to create multiple roles for educational leaders, but really define the competencies that are critical to doing this job successfully, how one uses continuous quality improvement to sustain quality practices, thinking about the ways in which the leader in the program is thinking very carefully both about sort of the needs collectively of the educators in the programs and how to support professional learning around those needs, but also how to support each individual educator within the program, making sure that reflective practice is a strong focus within the program and that there is time for collaborative reflection and planning, and that there are job-embedded professional learning opportunities as well. It's not just sending educators out for training and assuming that they'll bring it back, but when there's training, there's a thought about how it's supported and fostered when the educator comes back to the site. Go to the next slide. This just provides an update on where we've been and where we are. You can see the history of what we've done to get here, and we are in the process of completing phase 3 and moving towards implementing a staged launch of some of these options. You can go to the next slide. Core to the credential that we're developing is that there are going to be 2 pathways. And Matt, I've mentioned the challenges of the current certification process, which requires individual college courses. We are looking at 2 different pathways, a higher education pathway and a professional development pathway, and also thinking about how these pathways can link together so that you don't have to choose one and then stay on that forevermore, but giving educators flexibility to move across as well as a choice. On the higher ed side, we're really focusing on degrees and certificates. So it would no longer be individual college courses that give you currency in the higher education pathway, but the attainment of certificates and degrees. Apprenticeships can be built around this pathway, but similarly, apprenticeships can be built around the professional development pathway as well. And to launch this pathway, we were developing a set of approved EEC endorsed training packages that have been, we're working with a team at EDC to develop these. We've been spending a lot of time on identifying the competencies, the learning goals that come from the competencies, and designing a set of trainings that are really aligned to those learning goals and include very, very intentional opportunities for job embedded practice. So you learn something, you go out and you do something, you bring back reflections and artifacts from what you did, reflect on that collectively as part of the training, and then move on to the next topic. So that cycle of learning and that very focused approach is built into the training. And then also years of experience are also, you'll see, sort of built into the expectations of both of these pathways. So we recognize you need both the training and the professional learning that comes from participating either in higher education or in training, but there is also just time needed in the classroom to have the opportunity to really develop the skills and practice in an integrated way over time. Go to the next slide. And as part of this work, as we discussed, stakeholder engagement is really, really important. And we're thinking about this in many different ways. We're focusing on our own EEC team and state partner collaboration. So working with our divisions internally, the Department of Elementary Secondary Education, the Department of Apprenticeship Standards. We've also been working with higher education very intentionally, although that is more called out in the next slide, or the next box. And then there's this layer of, sort of our partners that go beyond our internal agency partners. That includes the community colleges, the Massachusetts Association for Community Colleges, working with our contracted professional learning providers like the professional development centers, the academy, and the early childhood support organizations, or ECSOs. So we've been reaching out to all these groups over time to both think about alignment as well as get feedback on how we've been developing as we go. And we're also at this point really focusing on broader field engagement. And in particular, I just want to call out that for the past 9 months, I think, 9 months to a year, we've had a working group that has met regularly, that includes representation from the field and from all different program types. Sometimes we meet all together, sometimes out of school time, family childcare and early childhood center-based meet separately. But this has been a really important working group to dig in very, very carefully and in depth in some of the things that we've been developing, and we've gotten great feedback from them. I will just call out that, sort of thinking about how we create a system that really works for all these different program types, when we've really had a system that only focused on one, is a big part of the lift in launching this, and this group is essential to doing that work. And I will talk about some of the feedback we've gotten from them as I go. Go to the next slide. So I'm actually going to break this down. I know there's a lot of information here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'm going to break down all the parts and walk through piece by piece, and then we'll put it back together at the end. But just to orient you a little bit, the blue level are the educator credentials. These are the credentials for people working with children directly. And then the green level reflects the many different roles that we've started to map out at the leadership levels. The little sort of scrolly boxes are optional endorsements that are additive on top of each of these levels. You can go to the next slide. So I think one thing that probably should have called out in the last slide, but on the upper left-hand side, there was an arrow that said entry to the credential. And one thing that we don't have in our current system, but really wanted to focus on, is that transition in. And how do we recognize the fact that there are people that come in without any experience or training, but upon entering the profession, they are learning and they are growing right away. And we could actually recognize and set some expectations for that and document. So if you think about this from a perspective of an educator's journey, somebody who's new to the field comes in. Before working with children, they're going to have to take the EEC Essentials. This is a self-paced health and safety training that's available on our Strong Start learning management system, and they have to pass a background record check. Then they are in the program and they're working with children under the supervision of a teacher. And now there's an opportunity to pursue additional training that has value to their skills in the classroom. They can get first aid and CPR certified. We have many other self-paced courses that start to focus on pedagogy available. So we're thinking we could create a package of approved training that is available to new educators to take, and support a recognition of educators once they've completed that. And after 3 months working in an early childhood program, you could give a stamp of approval that somebody has sort of completed these set of expectations. And they're now in that entry level phase. They're no longer new. They've moved into a place where they do have some skills, they do have some training, and we can recognize that. And at that point, what we want to do is support entry level educators in understanding what it takes to move into the pathways. What is the higher education pathway? How do you move on that? Where do you have to go? What do you have to do? What are your opportunities on the professional development pathway? What does that look like? So a new educator coming into the field who's beginning to think about the opportunities for professional growth within this system can also start identifying what their next step is to move towards level 1 and begin the process of moving towards meeting the expectations that are necessary to run a classroom. I'm seeing comments in the chat, and I think what I'll do is I will come back to yours, Michelle, when I get back to the big picture again. You can go to the next slide. So this is revisiting the educator level. So there's the entry that we just talked about, level 1, level 2, and level 3. And just to locate this in our sort of how it relates to our current system, in our current pathway, we have teacher certification and lead teacher certification. Educators with those certifications will get placed in level 1 and level 2, teacher certification and lead teacher certification. Level 3 is new. We've never had a level where we document and recognize the skill sets that go beyond the first 2 levels. But we also recognize that educators that stay in the classroom continue to develop their expertise. And we wanted to create a level that really recognized and valued the depth of expertise that comes from many, many years in the classroom, developing one's craft as a teacher. When we presented this to the working group, some of the things we heard from the out of school time and family childcare world, the administrative skills are actually very, very important early on. We get to those in the center-based world later on at the leadership level. But for FCC educators, they're running their own program out of the gate. So those administrative skills need to be recognized early on. And for out of school time programs, they often have met a lot of part-time staff, students, people that are working in their program that are really important to the program and do a lot of the work directly with children, but aren't necessarily on a professional pathway. That it's the administrative leaders in the programs that are more likely to be on a professional pathway, but they will also need the administrative skills. We heard that it's important to allow for growth in and out of the classroom as educators, coaches, and leaders, so that the level 3 is really designed as a place for somebody who wants to stay in the classroom and continue to grow their skills. But we also will talk, when we get to the next level, about opportunities if you want to move out of the classroom that go beyond being a director. We also heard that there are special skill sets that felt really important to recognize with educator. I think particularly like, the skills with different ages, like, there are some educators who are fabulous with infants or with toddlers, others that might prefer preschool or out of school time. And those are different skills. You can go to the next slide. So we added some endorsements. So again, these are optional endorsements that are built into the system, and we tie them to sort of the level that you need to have achieved to also attain the endorsement. So there is now an FCC and out of school time administrative endorsement that can be packaged with level 1 for somebody who wants to start running an FCC program or is interested in being an administrator in an out of school time program. We're also recognizing that we could add in an age-specific endorsement, so we can recognize those fabulous infant teachers and the very, very particular skill set that they're developing as educators move into level 2. And we also recognize that there's specific content. Some educators really develop their understanding of how to work with children with behaviors with challenge, understand social emotional learning. There's some that may be very interested in literacy and language development. So over time, as you develop your professional skills, you might also be developing a very particular content expertise, and we wanted to recognize that as well. And also provide multiple opportunities for educators who are still in the classroom, but also want to learn and grow over time to develop skill sets. Go to the next slide. So now this is the leadership level. And again, in our current system, you can see the box on the right. We have director level 1 and 2 certification. That will fit into the program leader credential. That is where those with director 1 and 2 certification will land in the new system, and that is the role that is most aligned to what we currently have in director 1 and 2. But we recognize that there are many other roles that are really important in the system that we envision with slightly different, although overlapping skill sets that we wanted to call out. So recognizing that mentors play a critical role in supporting new educators in a program and are particularly essential to the apprenticeship work that we're doing. Coaches similarly are important in helping educators learn and develop their skills. The types of training that we're developing require a depth of understanding and expertise that we wanted to also make sure that we defined, and that there is a level of educational leadership that goes above and beyond, but really draws on all of these different skill sets that we've called out as an educational leader level. And we've heard a lot from the field about really appreciating the ways in which these leadership skills provide options for people who want to learn and grow, but stay in the profession, but might not want to stay in the classroom or become a director. We've also heard from family childcare how important the opportunities that we've been providing to both become a mentor and also for new family childcare educators to have mentors available to them, and that this is a really powerful way to provide professional opportunities to that particular part of the field. And then finally, there is a suggestion that we ought to include some endorsements here. And Michelle, I think this is where you're calling out that it would be great to have, I think if I'm understanding this correctly, an endorsement in early childhood mental health as one of, and you can go to the next slide, because that shows where we're you can see we've added the content expert endorsement in as well in some places in the leadership pathway. And absolutely, the expertise in the mental health field is a shortage and a place that if we could support and incentivize many people in many roles in developing that expertise, that would support the system. You can go to the next slide. Actually, let me go back for a second. Are there any questions about this? Because it's a lot to take in, but again, you have the educator pathway, you move from entry through level 1, level 2, you can continue on to level 3. At level 2, you could start thinking about maybe becoming a coach or a mentor, a program leader. And then when you start to look at how the skill sets required for the coach, the mentor, the program leader, there's a lot of overlapping skill sets that could be built together to across these roles to support work as an educational leader. Cheryl.
Thank you. Thank you for all of this. Wow. Information. So for that leadership level slide, the darker green on the bottom. So if we, as a trainer, we would apply for that, and then that would allow us to do certain trainings. I'm trying to figure out like
why Let me
would
be
someone
clear
get that?
about that.
Okay.
So this is very conceptual right now, and I'm
Mhm.
going to get to the sort of the parts that we're going to launch early on. So part of what we are developing, when you think about the professional development pathway, we are going to develop a set of approved trainings that count for the credential. We are not creating a system where we're going to individually approve a whole host, like a package of trainings that an educator has put together. So we're thinking about having a set of expectations that could be reflected in a trainer credential that would define what one needs to have as a trainer to provide those trainings. We are not trying to mandate or regulate the entire field of trainers out there, nor, to be honest, are we launching a trainer credential anytime soon. Right now, we're working with the professional development centers and the academy to launch the first level 1 pathway, and we're working with them to select the trainers that will do that work.
Okay.
But like the actual launch of a training credential would be down the road, and I think subject to a lot of conversation and discussion about what would work.
Perfect. Thank you.
Bino?
Hi, this might be in the next part where you're talking past the conceptual, so feel free to punt. But what was going through my head was in the program leader, you had mentioned Director 1 and Director 2 certified directors are sort of going to get placed there. If there's going to be a difference in training, which you may or may not know yet, but somebody already has that credential, can they still access the training? My point being that we hear a lot about directors who have the director certification, but really want more training and more support. And my
Yep.
guess is the program leader one that you're building out is going to be really comprehensive and supportive. And though people have director certification, they may still want to do those trainings, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't think we have any intention over time to restrict trainings. I mean, in the early days when we're piloting something, we might focus on those that are new and moving up. I would also just call out, we do plan, right now, there's ongoing training requirements required by licensing. In the future, we do also plan that there'd be a renewal period, maybe 5 years. You have to renew and you have to show over the course of those 5 years that you've done some ongoing work, and that type of training could fit into that as well, even if it's, supporting you with a level that you already formally have. But definitely agree with you, Bino, that, there's a lot of important skills that we want to make sure we're reinforcing and supporting.
Right.
Steve?
So this is good. I appreciate it. The one thought, and you could ask me about it 3 months ago and I wasn't thinking about it, right? So is around youth employment. So we have and a whole lot of folks have the youth employment programs, the youth works programs, and we bring in high school kids to work in different work sites. And one of our more successful sites is the early education centers. So keeping that in mind when offerings are coming out this year, we're running into, we can't get them into the online class, those that are just graduating because the schedule is off. So they're missing the ability to be a teacher with us over the summer because of when the offerings of the community colleges are offered. So I say that just as a flexibility as one of the mindsets. So they're not only offered in, January and April and September sort of thing. As you're getting more granular, I know you're not there yet, but as you're thinking about who's going to deliver the trainings and credentialing, flexibility in delivery is just something to think about. That's all. And I get this is
No,
way on the road. I get it.
Yeah.
I just wanted to kind of throw it out there.
No, I just, it's highlighting an important point and something that, we're also starting to think about too. The scheduling is going to be complicated on this because we also are thinking, is there a sequence of trainings that one takes, and then how to have flexible access to a sequence. I do think that one of the advantages of the professional development pathways, we're not locked into semesters. And I mean, frankly, anybody moving forward on the higher education pathway is matriculated and moving towards a degree. So it's just a very different experience. But again, the advantage of the professional development pathway is it is available to people with a different set of goals for themselves or needs at any particular moment. It won't be perfect though. I mean, we will, there will always be challenges in terms of making sure there are enough trainers and enough course sessions available and that things are being offered when people need them. But I think that we will have a little more flexibility there.
Yeah, and they may shift, right? The youth we're working with today who are graduating from Chicopee High School this afternoon may not necessarily be on the college track next week, but maybe by September they are. And so, keeping all of those flexibility so they can work for us, right? That's the key. We want to get them in. We want to get them to love the position, and then we can develop them into our next great teachers.
Yep. Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't see. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Did you have a chance to touch on? I had to step away for a minute, but did you have a chance to touch on Michelle's comment? And Marissa had dropped in a link to around mental health.
Yes, Michelle, please jump in if I didn't respond to that fully. But
yeah, I think we did. I mentioned kind of the credentialing systems within the trainer and the coach systems, and just calling out. And the intention is really just calling out that mental health consultants in particular are so understaffed here in Massachusetts. And from a Head Start perspective, we have a regulatory obligation to have a certain number of hours per month of mental health consultation services. And we know many programs that are not Head Start agencies are also using mental health consultation resources. And we know that EEC's mental health consultation grant capacity is so limited. And so just calling out that is that role in particular, and we know kind of the MassAIM endorsement is excellent, and we want everyone to have it across the board. But in addition to the endorsement for folks in roles within centers, enabling folks who are looking to leave the classroom anyway, but stay engaged in the field to be headed towards pathway for mental health consultants in particular, is something we don't want to lose the thread and have folks who may otherwise have gone into that pathway to go into public schools or paras or elsewhere, which is where we often see them go, kind of into paras, but we'd love to pull them into the mental health consultant space. And so creating intentional, I know it is an unrelated pathway and outside of a, potentially outside of an EEC program pathway, although some Head Start programs do employ mental health consultants. But it is a role that is outside of our centers, but so critical to our operations that we want to make sure to try to lift up and to support that workforce development pathway as well.
Yeah, and I don't think that's outside. I mean, it does feel like it fits in, at least a part of that fits in well to the idea that there could be a content endorsement that's, we could look at what MassAIM has created. I put a note we discussed this a while back. I put a note to myself to circle back on that. Because definitely the other thing, it's clinicians in particular that are really short supply. And one thing that we've been working on is thinking about what are the many different roles that support the clinical work, but are also critical to making sure that the responsivity, the awareness, the understanding is there at the program site. It's not just clinicians that you need. So it's probably not the full answer through an endorsement, but it does feel like there are some roles and responsibilities that could be addressed by having that as an option, and that can be very supportive to the program and the program's work.
Thanks for that.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, thanks. They recognize that if you're under supervision of a licensed clinician, that's also acceptable for that type of work in Head Start. Why don't I go back to the time? Oh, did somebody else have a question?
No, that makes sense, Jocelyn. That was me, probably.
Okay, let's go back to the timeline and then we can pause again. So you can go to the next slide. So this is our very high level timeline. There's like 100 lines underneath each of these very big bars, maybe even more. But nonetheless, just to give a sense of progress and sort of where we're going and what work is ongoing, we are starting to wrap up the process of defining the competencies and the levels. We've really done a lot of work on the level 1 and level 2 competencies. We've been working with EDC to define a set of learning goals to support the development of trainings. We're finalizing the competencies for the leadership levels. And again, just calling out those are overlapping competencies. It's not a separate set for each of those roles. So say you start as a mentor and then you want to go on to be a coach, you're building on your mentor training and adding the training that you need to be as a coach. You're not starting over from scratch. And we are now working, as I mentioned, with EDC to create the first package of training and education opportunities for the professional development pathway, while simultaneously Ellen and Sarah have been working very closely with the community colleges around developing a foundational certificate that becomes the backbone of the educator pathway for the first 2 levels on the higher education side. And we're really hoping to start providing these opportunities during the fall and winter of FY26. We are also in the process. We've just gotten on board a fabulous vendor to do this IT development work. We're developing what we're calling the educator portal. So this is going to ultimately replace TQ and PQR, although not right away. And this will be the system that sits under mass.gov, so sort of leveraging the statewide infrastructure to provide access to an account, to identify an individual, and then build a registry into that, but go beyond just having that as a registry and a place to track advancement in the credential, but also thinking about ways in which this can be linked to where an educator works and start replacing some of the paper files that we're working with as we're tracking and documenting educator experience and qualifications as an example. So really trying to create a one-stop shop that simplifies and makes more efficient a lot of the processes that wrap around the advancement, the qualification, and the sort of confirming and verification of qualification of educators. And this is ongoing. You can see there's an arrow on the right-hand side. This is not ending in the spring and summer. We're going to do the very iterative process, which is a nice way to do this development work. You develop a piece, you test it, you get it working, then you add a new functionality and you develop that and test it and get it on. So you don't end up in a system where you develop a whole system and everybody's been waiting for the system and then one thing doesn't work and the whole thing crashes and you're sort of starting over. You can really have a very resilient and robust system as we grow it. And ideally would be able to engage with users like you over time in the testing and feedback loops around the development of each part. Regulations will play a very important role. I think everyone's familiar that we're revisiting our regulations and thinking about revisions. Teacher certification is written into our current regulations. Moving away from that will require regulatory change to support this new credential structure and remove the certification expectations from regulations. But this is also an ongoing process. And then finally, stakeholder engagement, as we mentioned, this is core to our work. And, we've been doing it, we will continue to do it, and this will continue for as long, really, as we're using the system. I mean, I think this is going to become a living and breathing system that we're constantly paying attention to and making sure it's functioning. And all of you and, the field as a whole are our partners in doing that work. Go to the next slide. This is getting a little bit more into the weeds of the next steps, but sort of highlighting some of the pieces of work that are currently underway. Teacher certification will continue until the regs are finally revised, but I think anybody getting teacher certification will know where they land in the new credential. And community colleges are in the process of introducing the new foundational certificate and making that available to students as well. Licensing regulations are obviously being revised, and that's in process. We're also piloting new training. I talked about this as well. We're building a number of different training packages with EDC, and we're going to pilot them, get some feedback about how they worked, sort of improve and launch again, and slowly over time grow access to these. And this focuses on opportunities for all different program types, including FCC and out-of-school time programs. We are working also on apprenticeships for all different program types. We have pilots going on that we've been funding across the state in each of these areas and continue to work with our partners on those apprenticeships. as well as, you know, continuing the work of thinking about what the next stage of development is. Now that we have much of the credential mapped out, what does an apprenticeship that is really aligned to where we're going look like? And how do we start to standardize what that looks like and provide a roadmap for launching a registered apprenticeship, for example, in early childhood, and make it easier for everyone. The educator portal I talked about, and it will be a stage launch. It's not like a wait for a massive perfect launch. We are going to be rolling it out piece by piece. And then at the box at the bottom, it just highlights sort of what in particular are we looking to get out over the next fiscal year. So level 1 and level 2 opportunities, training opportunities for the professional development pathway, as well as the foundational certificate and community colleges, available for all program types. And that includes the administrator endorsement for FCC and out of school time that we've been talking about. We also have a mentor training that we've already developed and building on top of that to make a mentor credential available and make sure the program leader credential is also available, both if you have director 1 and 2, but also creating the pathway for those that are coming to that role without that certification. And given the overlapping nature of the competencies at the leadership level, we are also looking to see if there's anything else that we can add, but this is what we're committing ourselves to at this point in FY 26. So like one of the biggest challenges of this is, I think it's clear, our ambition is pretty big with this system, but we need to launch it in bite-sized and manageable chunks so that we don't thoroughly confuse everybody and also get ahead of ourselves and end up frustrating people. So we're trying to be careful while also being ambitious. And Cheryl, I think that's where you can help us, is sort of help us think about like what's most needed at what point in time. How do we communicate clearly about this to the field? Because I think this is going to be a confusing transition to a field that has been deeply, deeply embedded in a system that has been in place for decades, and that is very different than the system that we're developing, and also making sure we're attending to the most urgent needs and places to focus as we grow this out. I believe that's the last slide on this part. Yeah, so we are, one thing that EDC is providing for us, so they're developing the package and then they are providing train the trainer sessions. Right now we're focusing on providing those to some of the academy and PDC trainers, but over time the academy would sort of take on that responsibility because we do want to make this as available as possible. So if we develop something, we would love as many people to use it well. And, you know, another thing we can think about, you know, our FCC systems interested in sort of taking some of those responsibilities on and training their FCC educators with large umbrellas do that. There are many opportunities to sort of build this out into the system and not try to just sort of restrict it to the small set of trainers that we have directly working in our system, our funded system.
That's very much appreciated as you think about the distance and diversity and linguistic diversity, et cetera. So
yeah. Oh, and we are paying attention to language access. These will be translated into the primary languages that we support, and then over time we can think about going beyond this.
Is the program leader pathway something that's being developed by the colleges, or will it be launched as a college pathway or a professional development pathway?
So we're looking at both for all things. I think the timeline might vary. So, you know, on level 1 and level 2, the foundational certificate is actually sort of advancing faster than the professional development pathway because it's building on courses that already exist. We're looking into the courses that do support Director 1 and Director 2 and the ways in which that they can be built out as part of a higher ed pathway while also developing the professional development pathway. And it just sort of depends on how long the process takes on both sides to see what emerges. And to some degree, I mean, just to go one step further, and Ellen, jump in if I'm, you know, misspeaking here, but that, you know, part of this is looking at like what are the programs that currently exist in higher education that can be leveraged and aligned to where we're going, and what has to be built new. If there, you know, is there a bachelor's degree that focuses on coaching, or is that something that's a new and specific skill set that might start as a professional development pathway option, but then could be grown and integrated into something that exists in higher ed? Cheryl?
Yes.
Thinking along that for when you're saying endorsements, are endorsements like college level training required, just so that in the community we're prepared, because academia doesn't always work as quickly as we like it to, so that if there's specific coursework that's needed and we want to make sure it aligns with the competencies.
Yes. And happy to have a follow-up and more in-depth conversation about some of these issues. But I will say, I think, again, we're trying not to put any restrictions or limitations on how this is available, and working through all of these options as a way to develop it. I think, there's a basic assumption that probably for family childcare and out of school time, the first place people will be looking is the professional development side. So we're sort of focusing on developing those admin training. For the age-specific endorsements, those are actually, we expect to be built into the training. So similar to how you have right now, you can take a curriculum focused on infant toddler or a curriculum course focused on preschool. That's what we can build such an endorsement around, and structure our training development in similar ways, so that to some degree that already exists. It's more a matter of calling it out.
So you might be able to potentially double dip. So if there's a course, say in the credential that's specific infant toddler curriculum, if you take that for the the certificate and stop using credential, but if you take that for whichever level, then it may also give you the age specific endorsement.
If you focus everything that you're doing for level 2 around a particular age, you might then get the age specific endorsement. It's not necessarily meant to be additive, although if you want to do multiple ages, it probably does become additive. But the content expertise, I think, well, actually, it could be similar in that the advanced coursework that you're taking could focus in a particular area.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for that, Jocelyn. In the spirit of timeliness, because we've got about 30 minutes left, we have one more section. Marissa, I see your hand, happy to take it. But what I'll say before you mention this is, as Jocelyn pointed out, we've got a long runway on this. We're trying to be really thoughtful and deliberative, and we've predicated this on a lot of engagement with folks. That's going to continue. So if there's an interest or an opportunity to plug in, if you're interested in sort of follow-up conversations, Jocelyn's team is available. Eugenia on my team is sort of a part of this. She's away for a couple more weeks, but she'll be back soon. So the working groups have been really sort of central and critical to a lot of this work. And we're going to work as closely as we can as we come to those inflection points and as we roll things out to make sure that we're doing that, like Jocelyn said, in ways that sort of make sense and don't come across as restrictive, and we're communicating it in the most seamless way we can. Marissa, last word over to you before we move on to
I'll be super quick. Just seconding Vinal's comment in the chat about how exciting this all is. The comment about language access made me think about this, that sometimes just logging into these accounts can be so complicated, especially since this is so new. And then with Jocelyn, you sort of raising that you all have started a contract with some IT support, wondering if there are any additional supports that can kind of be built into that login pathway that can help directors support educators to get into the portal, and can just kind of like simplify access, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, simplified access is important. It's also an interesting question, because you go sort of a little bit beyond just like what are the supports for the individual educator, but is there a way to allow somebody working directly with the individual educator to help them? That gets trickier, but I think it's an important thing to think about.
Yeah, something just to flag. Thanks.
Great point, Marissa. And Vinal, I appreciate you saying that. Tremendous amount of work here from Jocelyn, her team, our vendors, and like I said, really building on sort of years of dialogue around what a credential system can be. So kudos, I think, Jocelyn, sort of getting to this place, and I think the really exciting work. Jocelyn's been sort of head down, untangling the knots of these really complicated and complex conversations in partnership with a lot of people here. But we're headed to this place between the educator portal and looking at a real roadmap for rolling out parts of this credential. And it's just a really exciting sort of, we're at the top of the roller coaster, and we're about to go down, and it's going to get really exciting and change on the way. So thank you, Jocelyn, for your leadership on the work, and to your team for really doing the hard work on this to get us here. So more to come. Want to transition really quickly to another, I would say, equally exciting part of our work. in the development of a 5-year strategic plan. So for folks who are maybe unfamiliar, the agency has an obligation to produce a 5-year plan that's prospective and forward-looking, and that time is upon us. And I'm happy to introduce and welcome some folks have had the pleasure of working with Emily Connor-Simons, who joined the Commissioner's Office at the end of last calendar year as our Special Projects Director. But one of the things that she's focused on falls under that cap of special is this work to produce a 5-year plan. And the way that we've approached this is really to kind of build on, like we're talking about in the credential, really lift up and build on the work that we've undertaken since the last 5-year plan, but kind of going beyond that. We've established and we've done a lot of work to really create opportunities for listening and for feedback. And I'll turn it over to Emily to sort of walk through this in more depth, but we'll point out those places that we've sort of been calling from to inform early thinking about what this next 5-year plan can be. So we'll take a beat after this presentation to sort of talk about engagement for sure. But I want to preface the presentation with, we're really fortunate as an agency, I think, to be working from a really deep well of research, both outside of this agency, but really excitingly inside the agency for the first time in a meaningful way, new data we have access to, and just so many conversations with all of you and on the field. So Emily will dig into this, and I'm happy to turn it over to you now for that, and we'll come back around how we continue sort of the engagement through the development cycle over the course and through the remainder of the year.
Sounds great. Thank you, Chris. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me today. For those of you who have met before, excited to see you. Those of you I haven't, excited to work with you more in the future. As Chris mentioned, I'm the new Director of Special Projects at EEC, and one of my projects is working on our next 5-year strategic plan. So we are legally obligated, as Chris mentioned, to create a forward-looking 5-year strategic action plan. Allison, could you go to the next slide? And right now, so we're in the process of developing our plan for calendar year 2026 to 2030. To finish that by the end of this calendar year so that it goes into effect in January. Before we sort of jump into what our approach is going to be looking forwards for this next strategic plan, we thought it would be helpful to really ground ourselves in what our goals were in our previous strategic action plan that we set in 2020, and kind of looking back at a lot of the progress that we've made towards those goals over the last 5 years. So we skip forward a couple slides. We released our current strategic plan back in 2020, I think a day or two before the state of emergency around everything around COVID. So with a grain of salt that there were a lot of things that then had to be adjusted and updated in the plan. But our previous plan essentially focused on and had goals around 4 of our key stakeholder groups: children and families, educators, programs, and systems. And so what I want to do over the next couple minutes is walk you through kind of what the primary goal was that we set in 2020 for each of these stakeholder groups, and a few examples of some of the work that we've achieved over the last few years to help us get there. I was not here for most of those times, so I will not personally take credit, but I hope you all feel very celebrated in seeing the successes and the real growth that's happened just in the last few years as we go through the slides. They also are not exhaustive, so there may be things you don't see on the slides. That's not in any way to minimize that work, but we just couldn't fit everything on the slides. So I hope seeing some examples of some of our progress feels celebratory and exciting, and helps us as we start thinking forwards about what our next goals are going to be to guide our work. So the first section of our current strategic plan was focused around children, youth, and families. And so our goal was that children would be on track for success in school and to reach their potential, and that families would also be empowered to work and build their own economic mobility and support their kids. I'm not going to read everything that's on the slide, but just wanted to give folks a few seconds to sort of see a few examples of the work that we've done over the last 5 years to help move us towards that goal. And now I'll move us to our next goal. So the second focus area, very relevant to Jocelyn's presentation today, was around educators and professionals and supporting our workforce to be professionally prepared, well supported, and adequately compensated. As you heard, even from just Jocelyn's presentation, we've made an immense amount of progress in this area with our credentialing work, our pathways work, our partnerships with community colleges and PDCs. In addition to, as you'll see at the bottom of the screen, some sort of more temporary initiatives that we endeavored to do in 2020 and 2021 to help educators and our workforce navigate the specific challenges of the pandemic. So making a lot of progress towards building our systems and structures around supporting educators. Our next slide focuses on programs. And so this goal from 2020 was really around supporting program sustainability, program stability, and program quality so that families and kids had access to high quality, stable programs. And I think you'll see a lot of initiatives here that in the financial space, in the professional development space, in the staffing capacity space that have really kind of bolstered our ability to support programs and for programs to be able to support themselves in the longer term. And then the final goal that we had in 2020 was more at a system level. So thinking about how we could more efficiently and effectively use public investments in early education to create outcomes and opportunities for those we work with. And I think one of the real investments that you'll see here is an incredible increase in staffing capacity at various levels of the agency. With our first data analytic and research team, our first product team, kind of generally, I don't know the exact numbers, but I remember when I joined EEC, there was a lot of conversation about how much we've grown in the last few years. So we've really built out our internal capacity to provide all of these supports to the field that we know are going to make a difference. So just want to pause there for a moment to say I hope folks are excited to see kind of all the progress that we've made. I know that has been a very exciting part of my work on this so far as a new member of the agency, is seeing how much we've accomplished compared to our 2020 goals. And as we're moving forwards to thinking about the next 5 years of the agency, we're really keeping a similar kind of goal work alignment in mind. What are the goals that we want to get to, and how do we make sure that our work, that they are really well aligned with the work that we are doing and that we know we need to do to improve programs for kids and families. So with that, I'm going to shift us a little bit more into our forward-looking approach for the strategic plan. These are the main sort of things that we're thinking about in our approach over the next, I'll say, 6 months. To really, as Chris said, continue and expand on the current work that's happening. We're not looking to create some brand new initiative or totally start from scratch again on kind of what the system needs. We want to continue the work that we know is making an impact and keep pushing that work forwards. We also really want to center the input and feedback from families and providers and our various partners, including you all. You have provided so much input and advice and great perspective to help inform so many nuances of the different programs and initiatives that we have. And that is very much a core component of the work that we're thinking about for the next 5 years, and making sure that the things we're prioritizing are the things we've heard from our stakeholders, are the things that they want us to prioritize. We're also thinking a lot about best practice research in the field, research that's coming from us and our research team, as well as from other organizations and departments. There's been a lot of great research around best practices in the early ed space, and we're really wanting to have that be a foundation to the work that we're doing over the next few years. And the last two things that we're really thinking about are really this user-centered design. I think both within our many IT and tech modernization projects that we're working on right now, and also just more generally thinking about the experience of families, of providers, of educators, to have them really be thought about in all parts of the work that we're doing, and making sure that we are creating things that they can easily access and thinking about their experience accessing. And then the last thing is really this data and this our new data infrastructure, and really using the data that we're collecting and metrics to make sure that we're driving improvements and measuring progress in an ongoing way. So I'm going to jump a little bit into what each of these sort of looks like. We have engaged with a lot of stakeholders over the last few years and are using their input to inform our next strategic action plan. That very much includes you all and the incredible nuanced perspectives and input that you have for us, as well as our advisory council, our data advisory commission. We are really grateful for the regular input that we're able to get from stakeholders, and are going to continue to kind of build our work based on the things that we're hearing from you all. We also have a lot of other inputs that we've gotten over the last few years that are really driving this work. So a big one is the Interagency Early Education and Childcare Task Force that was launched last year by the governor. We had a series of listening sessions last year and really developed a lot of robust ideas about changes and initiatives that we can pursue. And as someone who's currently working on the task force, I can say that progress is very much being made. And so excited to use the things we've heard from those listening sessions as also a part, and the work the task force is doing as we're thinking about moving that work forwards. We also have just a lot of regular stakeholder engagement that we've really invested in over the last few years. The 9:30 call has been a real resource for us, and also the various listening sessions, working groups, and focus groups that Eugenia and others at the agency are running to really regularly check in with folks. As well as we're updating and revising our regulations right now, we're doing some very intentional, public comment and engagement opportunities to make sure that what we're working on feels right to those in the field. So just to say, I think this is one of the biggest pillars of the work of looking forwards for the next 5 years, is we're really trying to ground every priority in what we've been hearing from folks in the field about what they want us to focus on. On the next slide, you'll see sort of the research part of this. So I think there's been a lot of external research into the early ed space, or even just over the last few years. These are a few examples of some of the reports and briefs and things that have definitely been on our minds and that we're thinking about in developing the work that comes next. As well as you'll see on the next slide, more of the internal research that we're actually developing and putting out with our own research team. So with our new kind of increased capacity for data and research, we have our own research priorities and projects that are currently in motion. We're creating a lot more research briefs and updates around the status of our programs and initiatives. And that's really going to help us moving forwards, keep track of and see the changes that we want to see, and see what progress is and isn't happening. And then I would say on the next slide, I mentioned this briefly, but there's a lot of IT modernization and system modernization happening right now at EEC that's really going to be foundational for the work that we're doing over the next 5 years. So we're working on our CCFA family portal, our educator portal, have made improvements to our background record check navigator system, and are working on improvements to our learning management system. And all of this is really with the hopes that we have kind of the systems and the technology to support not only internal staff at EEC getting the work done, but our communications and our engagement with folks in the field. So again, thinking really hard about that user-centered design and making sure we have the systems that our families and our educators and our program directors need to be able to get support from us and run their programs well. The last kind of big bucket that is a core component of our approach on the next slide is our strategic objectives. I'm guessing most of you are familiar with these, but these are kind of our core organizing principles at the agency as we're thinking about the different buckets of work that we have. So we have our family access work, program quality, workforce supports, program stability, and our internal agency infrastructure. And we're really using this as an organizing framework for our next 5-year strategic plan to make sure that we are not only going deep, but also making sure we're covering all the different aspects of the things that we work on. Our work with families, our work with providers, our financial support, all of these pieces. So these are going to be really guiding lights for us as we map out our actual strategic plan to make sure that we're covering all of those areas. And then sort of the last thing I'll share is just sort of our next steps and process before we open it up for questions, concerns, reflections. We're doing a lot of work this summer on drafting, on stakeholder, some additional external and engagement with key stakeholders, developing and refining some metrics to track, and working with our board to really make sure that we're all feeling aligned on what those priorities should be. We are planning to come back to you all at our next quarterly meeting in September with a draft of our strategic action plan to get more concrete, specific feedback and reflections and reactions from you all. So excited to be here for that and give you some more details at that point. And then again, our current plan is to bring this to our board in November and December for presentation and vote so that it will go into operation in January. So with that, I will sort of open things up if folks have reflections or questions. I think one question we do have also is sort of what level, you know, like we're really building this on a lot of stakeholder engagement that we've already done. And also we're aware that maybe there's no such thing as too much stakeholder engagement. So would be curious what folks think about engagement that they would recommend we do outside of the agency kind of over the next few months as we're refining and finalizing and putting this final document together, and maybe even beyond that. What level of engagement and do you think we should do kind of moving forwards with this? Heidi, I see your hand up.
Thanks. I think this is all great information, and I enjoyed participating in the last development of strategic plan and look forward to participating however makes sense in this one. One of the things that I wanted to just highlight that I'm not sure, like the first time I saw the presentation this morning, I missed it, but I caught it this time. C3s was actually developed over the past 5 years. So it's not only that it was revised, but it was initially developed, and it is such a critical operational tool for stabilizing the field that I think that's one of the biggest accomplishments that really should be highlighted in the process. So.
Definitely appreciate that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it sort of comes through, but I'll just draw a point to it, you know, and I mentioned at the top of the presentation, we're really fortunate, I think, to come from a strategic plan that was sort of the bedrock of a lot of the thinking that we've sort of undertaken, a lot of the accomplishments we've made over the last couple of years. And while that's been happening, Heidi, to your point, we've been really committed to building. We've been fortunate with support from the legislature over the last few years to really make progress and make movement. So a lot of the work Emily's doing right now is sort of taking the learning from all the work that's gone in over the last 4 years, both anecdotally through new data, and trying to think about and just a huge amount of work that is happening at the agency every day. That's informing what the strategic plan is going to really look like, beginning from where we are right now and sort of looking out those 5 years of sort of what does the next step take and the step after that, and how do we build that sort of like now, next, later approach to really pragmatically and practically making progress towards some of the goals we're working on identifying that build on where we start, where we're at, and where we'll start the next calendar year in that 5-year cycle. C3 is obviously a huge component of it. You know, the credential would be a big part of it, and all the work we're doing to support educators. So, yeah, I think, you know, we talked about this morning a little bit, the advisory committee, but we're sort of taking this approach of building from where we are and taking the learnings we have. But we also discussed, and I'd sort of put that to this group here, like Emily mentioned, what can and should engagement look like? Obviously, we're going to come back to this group, but you know, we're mindful of making sure we have enough capacity. We've really put a premium on engagement. We talked about the importance of feedback loops. So as folks give us things, making sure that we're reflective in that. And I think that's an important point that we think about, but it's always good to hear. So I know we have like 2 minutes left, but I just want to put that question. If anyone has thoughts or feedback generally on the approach, that'd be fantastic. I'll never take silence as perfection, but it's a good sign. All right. I won't belabor it. Steve, I saw you come on camera. I'm not sure if that's an indicator of interest or what. No. All right.
Well, I just realized I wasn't on camera. I didn't want you to think I had fallen asleep or anything. So
Confirmed for the record. Well, I'm happy to wind down 2 minutes early and just say thank you everyone for the time with us, not just today's meeting, but over the last 4 meetings over the past year. What we'll do next is get everybody, we're always trying to give folks enough time to plan for these meetings. So we'll think about the next year's cycle of meetings, get everybody those dates so that you can have them on your calendars well in advance. They'll be up on our website. You can always go back there to check old materials if anyone sort of needs to go back in time. So happy to share those links, but appreciate everybody's time and attention. And since we won't see this group, have a wonderful summer. And we'll catch back up with you in September.